I'm excited to be here today to present today's webinar on climate smart communities as a high impact action in the Clean Energy Communities program. We're very, very pleased to be joined today again by Dazzle Ekblad, climate policy analyst for New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Amanda Mazzoni, Clean Energy Communities Coordinator for Central New York, and our panel of municipal leaders, who I will address in full, I'll name in full in a moment, but they'll be describing their community's climate smart communities journey. The usual questions always come up at a webinar, so I'll address them quickly. We will be sending you today's slides to everyone who registered. I heard from a few people who couldn't join us, so we'll get those out to you, no worries, afterward. You can use the Q&A feature to send us questions. We're not going to be responding throughout the webinar, though. We will save them up for the end, about 1:50, and we will get to as many as we can, but if we cannot get to them all, we will send around a document that captures everything. This webinar is being recorded. You'll get that link, and will be, as I said, ending promptly at 2 p.m. So let's get started. Amanda, you're up first to tell us about how this fits into the Clean Energy Communities program.
Okay, thanks, Pat. Can you see my screen okay? I'm just going to start the slideshow. Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'm just going to give a brief introduction today to the Clean Energy Communities program and explain just quickly how the Climate Smart Communities certification fits into this program. So to start, I wanted to first put us all into the state context. The New York State's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act goals are really what's driving the Clean Energy Communities and Climate Smart certification program. And so it's important to know how local governments fit into the statewide goals. And really, this point at the bottom here is key, that local governments are needed to reach the statewide goals. So before we talk about a couple of state clean energy and climate related programs, I just wanted to set forth some of the goals from the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. So by 2030, the goal is to achieve 70% of our electricity in the state from renewable sources and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% from 1990 levels. By 2040, the goal is to achieve 100% zero emission electricity, and then by 2050 to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 85% from the 1990 levels. So again, local governments are key in helping to achieve these goals, and so I just again wanted to make sure we had this context for the rest of our discussion today. So what is the Clean Energy Communities program? This is a program from the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, or NYSERDA, that was created in 2016 to help municipalities to complete clean energy actions. The Clean Energy Communities program has a network of coordinators throughout the state to help municipalities to complete these actions. And I have included this page so that you can see who your coordinators might be. This also is a link to the page online for when you receive the slides after. So you can check back if you need to reference this list of coordinators. But as you can see, it's pretty extensive with multiple coordinators per region. So a lot of assistance available in pursuing clean energy actions. In case you're not familiar with what region your community may fall into as it pertains to this program, here's a reference map for you as well. This is also important because some of the grants that are available through this program are tied to your region. So you're kind of competing first come, first serve for grants against other communities in your region. If you are a small or medium-sized community, which I will explain a little bit more in just a moment. So again, this program has been around for 5 years now. There's been a lot of participation across the state. Every region has participating in designated communities. Designated communities are those communities that have completed at least 4 of the high impact actions that are a part of this program. And participating communities have completed at least 1 of the actions. So again, you can see there's interest across the state. Designated communities in every region. And so we want to continue this momentum because the state just in January of this year released the leadership round of the program with additional clean energy actions as well as additional grant funding. So communities have received grants through the last round of the program are still eligible for grants through the new round of the program. There are new ways to achieve these grant funds, and I'll explain those now. I just wanted to first make a note that these grant funds through the Clean Energy Communities program are currently only available to municipalities that pay the system benefit charge on their electric bills, but the technical assistance from the contractors from the coordinators are available to any community, even if you don't pay the SBC. So most communities, you may be familiar with the designation grants. This was the only way to achieve grant funding through the last round of the program. If your community completes 4 of the high impact actions, you become a designated clean energy community and can now receive a $5,000 grant towards additional clean energy projects. There are 2 new pathways for grants in this program in the leadership round. The first is action grants. So some of the actions are associated with a grant for just completing that one action, and I'll explain those momentarily. And then points-based grants. So the high impact actions are now all associated with a certain number of points. So if you complete the action, you receive the points, and if you reach certain point thresholds, you become eligible for point-based grants. So what this looks like, it depends on the population of your community. For large communities, that's considered communities with a population of 40,000 or more people. You're competing for these point-based grants on a statewide scale. So there are 50 grants statewide available at the 3,000 point threshold, and they are worth $30,000. If you achieve 4,000 points, there are 20 grants available statewide at $70,000. And then if you reach the 5,000 point level, there are 10 grants available at $150,000. For a small and medium-sized community with a population of less than 40,000 people, there you are competing against other small and medium-sized communities in your region. So that's where that regional map comes in. If you achieve 3,000 points, there are 40 grants per region at $10,000. There are 10 grants at $20,000 available if you reach 4,000 points. And then finally, if you reach 5,000 points, there are 4 grants per region at $70,000. And so the important thing to note here is that if you do reach that 5,000 point threshold, these grants are cumulative. So you would be eligible for the $10,000 grant, the $20,000 grant, and the $70,000 grant. So $100,000 in grant funds for additional clean energy projects. The other thing to note with that, though, is that you want to make sure to submit your actions as you complete them to ensure that you do reserve these lower point-based grants before you get to the 5,000. So don't wait to the last minute to submit for all of your points. And then finally, in some cases, if you completed actions through the last round of the program, you can retroactively be assigned points for those actions, although this is not true across all of the actions. So make sure to speak with your Clean Energy Community Coordinator to figure out which actions that pertains to and see how many points you currently have. The final way that a community can receive bonus funding is through the Disadvantaged Community Bonus Grant. So this is available for any community that achieves a point-based or action grant in the amount of $20,000 or more if they plan to use that funding for a clean energy project located within a disadvantaged community. They would then receive a $10,000 bonus grant for that project. The idea is to encourage that communities use grant funding for clean energy projects within disadvantaged communities that might otherwise be disproportionately affected by the impacts of climate change. This link will be live when you receive the slides later, so you can check and see where those disadvantaged community areas are. They typically are not full municipalities, they're just sections within communities. So make sure to take a really close look at that map and talk to your coordinator about the disadvantaged community bonus grant. And quickly, I'm just gonna have these high impact actions listed here. I'm not going to walk through them all today, but they're just here for your reference. You can see how they all have a certain amount of points associated with them for completion. Climate Smart Community certification is, of course, what we're here to discuss today. It is worth 600 or 800 points towards those point-based grants, depending on if your community becomes a certified bronze or silver Climate Smart community. And a couple of points I wanted to make about that. The first is that any of these high impact actions through clean energy communities that your community completes is also eligible for points through the Climate Smart Communities certification program. So, if you're working on clean energy communities, you're really working on Climate Smart Communities certification, whether you're aware of it or not. It's just a matter of working through the additional requirements for Climate Smart certification as far as submitting documentation in that location as well. The other thing is that your clean energy community coordinators are often available to provide assistance working towards certification as far as reviewing certain action documentation prior to submittal. So reach out to your coordinators again to see what type of assistance that they are available to provide on your path towards Climate Smart Communities certification. This page lists the remaining actions through the Clean Energy Communities program, as well as the 2 actions that are associated with action grants. If your community adopts the New York Stretch Energy Code, you can be eligible for a $5,000 or $50,000 action grant, depending on if you're a small or large community. And then community campaigns is the other action that's associated with action grants. These are local education and outreach campaigns related to 4 different clean energy technologies. And if your community completes these local campaigns and achieves the minimum number of signups or purchases, then you can become eligible for a $5,000 or $15,000 action grant per campaign type. So again, there are 4 campaign types. And therefore, if you're a small community, you could be eligible for up to $20,000 in grant funds or up to $60,000 if you're a large community. So that is just a really quick overview of the Clean Energy Communities program and how it ties into the Climate Smart certification work. So I just want to highlight one more time, please reach out to your local coordinator if you'd like to learn more about the Clean Energy Communities program or have questions about how they can assist in your Climate Smart certification process. So with that, I am going to pass it over to Dazzle Ekblad.
Okay, all right. Can you all hear me all right? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, excellent. Happy to be here. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to start my slides here. Okay, all right. So my name is Dazzle Ekblad, as Amanda said, and thank you, Amanda, very much. That was really helpful for me as well to have a reminder of the larger context of how the Clean Energy Communities program has changed for this next round. So I'm going to run through this pretty quickly. took the approach with these slides that you guys are going to get a copy of them. So I included a lot of information that in today's webinar, I'm just going to pretty much kind of gloss over and go through pretty quickly. But I wanted you guys to have some information just as a reference. So I'm going to try to move through this pretty quickly, and just know that if some of it breezes right past you, it's okay. Just let it wash over you and you'll get a copy later. But I'm going to try to sort of highlight a couple things. And I'm going to also try to give you guys a quick kind of display a demo of the Climate Smart Communities portal website as well, and some of the bells and whistles that are easy to overlook but useful. But I actually wanted to start today just with a little bit of a context and a reflection on why we're here. And for those of you who have the privilege of looking out a window, just take a minute and look out that window. I have a little view of the sky. I'm right here in Albany at home. And I just want to remind everybody of why we're here, and remember that sky, and remember that that sky is connected to the atmosphere, and that we're all on this same planet together. And we have this miraculous thin envelope around our whole planet that regulates our climate. And it is our shared resource. And, you know, humanity's history, we weren't always aware of this, but now we are aware of it. And I think there's a fundamental way a fundamental message behind climate change of this kind of interconnectedness, and this memory that this air that we're breathing and the way we relate to the trees and the entire planet's biosphere is related to this atmosphere, and that on one level, climate change is about this air and gases that may not smell like anything. Some of them do. Methane certainly does, but others don't. But it's something that's kind of subtle. And I think underneath this question of climate change and how it's affecting us is this relationship to this pretty miraculous atmosphere that's above us and that affects us and all of life on this planet. And here's the reality of where we are. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has never been as high in all of human history as it is now. We are at an unprecedented point in time. It's pretty miraculous and pretty shocking. And it's important to just remember this. And so how we navigate this challenge and this reality is really important. And we're at a point where we need to act quickly. You know, you guys have probably heard some of the reports that the next 10 years, even 8 or 9 years now, are really critical in bringing those levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere down to help make this planet more livable the way that it's been over the last 800,000 years. That's what this chart across that bottom, those are thousands of years ago across the bottom, and that's CO2 concentration on the left. And also, just for some perspective, remember that humanity only developed agriculture somewhere around 15,000 years ago. So this is very unusual. And so we're facing this big challenge, and how we respond is really important. And New York State is particularly interesting, as Amanda mentioned rightly, to sort of put this all in the context of the Climate Act. It's an amazing, ambitious, complex piece of legislation. And the reality is that we need you, all of you who are listening in on this call, we need you to implement the goals of this act and to take action to reverse climate change. And everybody has a role to play. And I have been gratified in many of the press releases that my office has worked on with the governor, where that role, the critical role of local communities and municipal governments in particular, are key partners. And there's no way we're going to meet the very ambitious goals of this act without that. So this is the point at which I might start moving a little bit faster, just so you're aware, because some of you probably have this context, but I actually wanted to take a few minutes and walk through the kind of big picture about what Climate Smart Communities is, because mostly today we're talking about the certification program, but there are other components of the Climate Smart Communities program. So in a nutshell, it's assistance to local governments so that they can be leaders in leading efforts in their community to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and help reverse climate change, and also to adapt to climate change. And as a reminder, this is an entirely voluntary program focused on leadership recognition. There are no fees involved, and DEC, the agency I work for, does take the lead in administering the program and coordinating the involvement of the different agencies and doing a lot of the outreach, but it's sponsored by 7 different state agencies in total, and it has been an interagency effort since the beginning. And it is a complex, multifaceted program, and part of what that helps with is it helps it be flexible with that recognition that New York State's a big place. There's a lot of different types of ecosystems and different sets of values in different communities and different ways of going about things. So the framework that the Climate Smart Communities program puts out is the intent is that it can be flexible and adapt to local priorities. So why do communities participate? In a nutshell, I would say the first and the last two things on this list are the most important. The free technical assistance that people like Amanda and other coordinators provide is essential, and I'm sure that many of you listening in know that, the value of having somebody to call with a question. That free technical assistance in some form has been part of the program since its beginning. And then there is funding associated with Climate Smart Communities as well. And that's both in the sense that communities who participate and who are active in Climate Smart Communities tend to be more well positioned to compete for different funds, whether that's state funds or federal funds, even philanthropic type applications for grants often require the kind of studies and the kind of foundational work that many Climate Smart Communities do. And then of course, there is also the Climate Smart Communities grants and the ZEV funding from DEC, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. I also wanted to offer a kind of a timeline, a big picture about Climate Smart Communities, and I won't go into all these bullet points, but I want you all to be aware that this program has been around for over 10 years. It was launched in 2009. I started working for the DEC in 2014, so it predates me. It has been around for a long time. As Amanda mentioned, the first round of NYSERDA's Clean Energy Communities program came into play in 2016, and that's also after the certification program was launched under Climate Smart Communities. That was back in 2014. And you all may have only recently become aware of the certification program because when the website was launched, that also really changed things. And as I said, I'll try to fit in a little quick demo of the website. But this is also a good reminder that the program is multifaceted. It's gone through different phases and stages, and it's evolved over time, and it's become a big umbrella for a range of different initiatives. And I will also mention, just as a little teaser, keep your eye on the news over the next 2 weeks. There will be two pretty major announcements. Okay, let me touch base quickly about the DEC's funding programs. And I will emphasize that these are managed. This is the kind of non-interagency part of the program. The DEC Office of Climate Change manages two electric vehicle related programs, which are only for municipalities, but they're rebates for electric vehicles to add those vehicles to the fleets. And this year's round is exciting because the amount of the rebate has increased pretty significantly. So check that out. It's open now. The Climate Smart Communities grants are also available now. The CFA is open, so I encourage you to check that out. We've got $11 million available under the Climate Smart grants this year. And that actually includes $1 million is available for planning, assessment, study type projects that focus on Climate Smart Community certification actions. And here's that list. There's 16 specific certification actions that are eligible for funding under this year's Climate Smart Communities grants. And again, I'm not going to read all these slides. I just wanted to help you guys have a reference point. The RFP or the RFA for the Climate Smart grants is a good 30 or so pages long. So I thought I would just grab these 16 actions to remind you that if you're interested in completing these actions, there are resources available to help you do that. It is a competitive program though, so be aware that the Climate Smart grants both require the municipality to provide half of the cost of the project. It is a 50-50 matching program, and it's competitive, and we often get more projects that we can fund, so you'll have to work hard to design a good application. Okay, on another kind of big picture level for the whole program, since 2009, there have been actually 332 now communities that have registered pretty much at least monthly. We get new communities rolling in that have taken the pledge. Taking the pledge is just the entry level participating level in the program. It's a formal municipal resolution that includes the 10 pledge elements that I'll go over next. So at this point, we're at about 48% of the New York State population, which is great. And then, so as I mentioned, in 2014, the certification program was released. And so far, we have 65 certified communities who have achieved either bronze or silver level. And achieving certification is a high bar. So I'm really excited for you all to have the opportunity to hear from John and Josh and Nikki about their community's progress towards reaching certification, because it's a lot of work, and it means that it's something that communities who've gotten to this level should be really proud of. So let me just touch on those Climate Smart Communities pledge elements. Here are the 10 pledge elements. They're kind of the principles behind the program. These form the kind of framework and structuring categories for the program, and also it gives you that sense of how comprehensive the program is yes, there's a huge emphasis on energy, but there's also an emphasis on how municipalities manage and have policies related to recycling and materials management. And there's an emphasis on climate adaptation, as well as informing and engaging the public and recognizing this is an ongoing process. And in some ways, it's really a shift in our thinking and our culture, and that municipalities can take that role. And I will say that Pledge Element 10, as I've been managing this program, has become my favorite. Evolving process is the name of the game. So that's what we're up to. And the pledge that is that first level of participating in the program that you pass as a municipality to be considered part of the program is verbatim these 10 pledge elements and then some other, whereas type statements. But this is a prerequisite. Passing that pledge is a prerequisite to getting certified. All right, let me talk a little bit about the certification program, just so you have a sense of how it's structured at a high level. As I mentioned, those 10 pledge elements are the kind of high level categories that the actions are a part of. And there are two other categories, innovation and performance. I won't go into detail, but those are two other categories that you should be aware of. So it is a point-based program. You need to get 120 points for the entry level, for the bronze level, and 300 for silver. And there's over 100 actions. It's a long list, and the number of points varies a lot. There are different kinds of actions. And the types of actions vary as well. As a municipality, you can earn points for doing planning. You can earn points for education and outreach, for passing policies, and also, of course, for solid implementation projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions or that help protect your community from the increasing severe weather we're seeing. And each of those actions have these action descriptions that are pretty detailed, and they offer guidance on how to complete those actions. And this is one of the aspects that I like to emphasize with people, is that the certification program, getting certified is a lot of work. It's a lot of organization and documentation, and you may submit something and need to revise it and submit it again. But those actions and those descriptions are available to anybody who's interested in completing these actions, whether or not they're interested in getting the leadership recognition that's part of becoming certified. These are just good examples to follow, and we try to update them regularly to be sure that they're relevant and they have good model work. Okay, now I wanted to offer this diagram and kind of, again, step back to the bigger picture and remind us where climate smart community certification sits in relation to clean energy communities. So this is a diagram that has proved to be very useful, and we used it since the beginning of the emergence of the Clean Energy Communities Program in 2016. And I think you probably already have a sense of this from what I've said. The Climate Smart Communities Program covers adaptation. It's a comprehensive climate action program. And so in some ways, it's more encompassing, whereas Clean Energy Communities is more focused on actions that save money, actions that are focused on energy. But the reality is that the two programs are complementary, and that there's benefits to doing both, and that when you're doing one, you're also doing the other potentially. They're very interconnected. And when the second round of Clean Energy Communities, the leadership round funding became available, we updated what we call the crosswalk table, and that's gives a list of the clean energy communities, high impact actions right next to the equivalent climate smart certification actions. And I'll show you where that's available in a little bit. Okay, so this is the point at which I am going to attempt to sort of share my browser and try to give you a little bit of a walkthrough of the portal. And I created this slide just as a reference point, and hopefully it'll be something you can go back to, and I'm going to touch base, I'll show you in some of these slides. Okay, so let's get this out of the way. All right, so here's the home page. And so when you click on this map, one of the most important parts of the website is that you can get access to every single piece of documentation that every certified community submitted that was approved for points. So this participating community map, number one, it's useful for figuring out if your community is registered or certified. For example, let's just look at one of these profiles for a registered community. If you see, for example, that your community is listed here, but it hasn't been active and you want to get access to this website and some of the features that I'll show today, for example, here's the village of Delhi. If this person, Christina Zill, let's say maybe she worked for the village a long time ago and doesn't work there anymore. If you want to get access to your profile and to your registered community's information, just contact our office, and I'll show those contact emails later. But that's That's sometimes happens since the program's been around since 2009. So that's important to realize. And let me show you those certification reports really quickly. So let's click on one of the certified communities. Here's Saranac Lake. You can see view report. If you click on this, you can even download the whole report and the actual documentation that was approved. You can access it. And in general, I recommend pulling up certification reports from communities that have been more recently certified if you want to look at examples that are more likely to meet the current requirements, because as I mentioned, these requirements get updated periodically. The other valuable filter that's on this participating communities page that I want everybody aware of is if you click on the pledge elements, you can choose one of these actions, let's say interior lighting upgrades, click it and then hit filter. And then what you're going to get on the map are communities that are certified that got points for that action. So you can also filter for a particular action that you're interested in. All right. I also want to remind people that the getting started page is really, really useful. And you can get there by, let me back up a second. So if you happen to be on the participating communities page, go up here to this top level menu, and then you can get this whole menu on the side. And that will bring you to the getting started page. And this is useful as kind of a home page to help keep you oriented and a reminder of all the steps that are involved and all the stages that are involved if you're moving towards certification. So this is where, if your municipality has passed the pledge and you want to register, this is where you would sign up for a portal account and get your community listed. This is where it sort of walks through all these steps. And while I have this kind of menu open, I'm also going to help you realize that there's a whole bunch of pages on here that if you have questions about the program, I encourage you to take a look at. And there's a couple pages, especially on the side here, that are common questions. For example, municipalities often ask, hey, we completed, say, a watershed assessment, and we weren't like the only municipality that was involved. Say there were 6, 7 different municipalities, or it was led by the county, or it was led by a regional planning association. But my municipality helped pay for it, or was part of the advisory committee. Can we still get points? This collaborating with partners to complete actions page is a good reference point to kind of get a sense of whether your community would still be eligible for points for collaborative projects. The other page that's on that menu on the side that is really important is if your municipality is interested in getting certified, we have these 3 certification periods every single year that you need to submit your application by that date. And this schedule also tells you when you would be notified whether your community got certified or not. So these dates are really important as well. And we are currently nearing the end of the Q2 review period. So stay tuned. So the other page that's really important, and again, if you go back to this, kind of center yourself on this getting started page, it refers pretty much, soon in step 3 to the actions page. And so here, this is where the kind of the meat, if you will, or the kind of list, the details of all the actions that are on. This is the certification actions page. And as I mentioned before, in relation to clean energy communities, this is where we have the crosswalk document. So you can click here and download that document and get that relationship between the 2 programs on a detailed level, action to action. And there's also these useful lists up here that we call the action checklist. This is just I think it's 5 pages now of just a list of the title of the actions and some basic information. But in order to get the details of the actions on this page, you need to, I just happen to have this open, you need to go down and look under the pledge element and click on the action name. But in general, notice that there's these 2 buttons on the side which are helpful, kind of collapse all, and there you can see the 10 pledge elements and the 2 other categories. And then you can expand if you want to see the full list. I use those a lot. And if you want to see the description for a particular action, open up the pledge element, click on that, and then you'll get the full description. You can even get a PDF of that action description if you'd like. And also be aware that on this public actions page, there's this little summary of the certification criteria on the side, and there's this little action totals calculator that if someone who doesn't have an account in the portal can kind of play with things and say, well, we're planning on doing a government operations climate action plan. See how those numbers change. This calculator can kind of help keep track of those numbers. But again, this won't be saved because this is just a public page. And let me contrast that and jump right in to what, if you have an account, you've signed up, you have a password and you have an email and a password, and you sign up. Right now, I'm going to show you the kind of, this is the internal part of it. Once you're signed in, you can kind of see here up at the top I'm signed in, and if you click on dashboard, and I just happen to have the town of Montgomery that I'm a user for, this gives you the internal dashboard that you can update your municipality information. You can manage who has access to this, but most importantly, you can work on your application for Climate Smart Community certification. So this is one basic distinction that I think is important to make. This is the internal side of the actions page, and this is the application page. And notice it does have the municipality name at the top, but it's organized in a very similar way as that actions page by the pledge elements and these two kind of summary boxes on the right-hand side. But be aware that they're different. So if I, for example, look in here, you can, if you click on one of the action names once you're logged in here in the dashboard, it's going to give you the submission page. So this is where, as a municipality, you'll put together your submission, describe how you implemented this action, upload documentation, and hit save. And be aware, though, that in the screen, you can get the description of the action. It's kind of in tiny writing at the top there, but you see if I click on that, you can still get the description of the actions there. And the other things that I think are worth noting in this application view, once you're logged in as a municipality, is again, you've got the sort of summary of the certification criteria, and then you've got these action totals. And there is a search box. If you're interested in just for searching for terms in the titles of the actions, you can find them. And there's also all these filters. So say my community has started to get a sense of which actions it wants to do and has marked some actions as planned. If I use this filter and click planned, notice it actually changes the action totals on the right. This action totals box is also responsive to the filters. So that's just a good tip. Okay, that is plenty of a little bit of a walkthrough. Let me go back to my slides. First, you get to see my messy desktop here. Okay. So I wanted to, oh, am I gonna have to start? There we go. Okay. I also wanted to offer some closing advice around if you're thinking about getting certified. I think one of the most important places to start is recognize your people, find your people, build a strong team, and do the groundwork. Find the people who are motivated to do this and work on getting that kind of top level support all the way down from a volunteer who might be working on something, 2 hours a month, all the way up to your top elected officials. So you can get that alignment and you can enable someone who's working on certification to talk to those elected officials or to a department head and ask for documentation. Build on regional partners such as your county level planning office, for example. If you're a smaller municipality, your county might be able to help with some planning and resources, or they might have some GIS resources, for example, that local smaller municipalities tend not to have. And you'll hear some today, I think, from John Camillo from Colgate University about the key role that academic partners, local municipalities, SUNY schools that can play in helping your municipality build out its capacity and get students involved in really exciting projects. And as Amanda said, please talk to your Clean Energy Communities Coordinator if you're thinking about getting certified, and they can help you walk through some of the initial steps. The amount of help they can offer will really depend on the region and on the coordinator, but they will be able to help you at some level. And I recommend that on that team, you include at least one person who can read through those action descriptions and grab those details and understand exactly what the requirements are, and be sure that your municipality understands that as they're working to implement the actions or provide documentation about those actions. And again, certification program is leadership recognition. And yes, there's some financial benefits and it's linked to Clean Energy Communities funding. But ultimately, I think it's important for all communities to remember that your home, your community is important to you. And there are unique things that you care about and the people in that community care about. And this program is kind of a means to an end, and it might help, but it shouldn't dictate what your priorities are. You should start with, who are we? What do we care about? What's important? And build on a process that builds capacity at the local level to even do more than what certification offers, and recognize there may be unique, innovative ideas that will be important for your community that may not be part of the certification program. This is an agency process, and us state agencies are not really known for working very quickly. We try to keep it relevant, but there's lots of layers of approval and bureaucracy and even politics that sometimes get in the way. So be aware that you should take on this program in a way that fits for you, and focus on your own goals at the local level. And remember that there is a timeline associated. There's those very structured application periods, and keep in mind that in order to get bronze, you probably need to do at least 20, maybe somewhere 20 to 25 different actions, and that may take some time. Even the communities who have done so much work in the past and have been a leader in climate change, it may still take them, I've seen communities who have done a lot of work in the past, but it still takes them maybe as much as 6 months, because they're doing, of course, all sorts of other stuff to assemble their documentation, put together their application. So realize this is a time-intensive and document-intensive process, and so it may take a little bit of time. And it's always a good place to start is focus on those priority actions. I think there's 13 of them now, so that's always a good place to start. And remember, there's funding available. There is support out there for doing these actions. So let me close with that, and so you can hear from what I bet will be a really exciting panel discussion. There's a whole set of emails on this page, and again, you'll get a copy of these slides, but we have decided to kind of divvy up the program. If you have questions about the ZEV rebates, you use that email. Question about the grants, use that email, etc. So thank you for your time and attention, and I look forward to listening to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dazzle, and thank you, Amanda, for both setting us up so nicely for the next part of our discussion. There's many people doing great things in both programs, but when we went into our huddle to figure out who the speakers should be for the panel, 3 names came back around to us, and we're so pleased to have these representatives, happily, of a city, a village, and then I think a collection of towns, maybe some villages too. But I'll start by saying our first panelist is the Honorable Nikki Armacost of the village of Hastings on Hudson. Nicola has served as the mayor since 2019, and before that she was a trustee of the village from 2009. Under her leadership, Hastings is currently the highest ranking clean energy community in New York State, and it's one of only 7 silver level climate smart communities. P. Josh Wilson is the Director of Sustainability and Resiliency Programs for the county of Erie, with Buffalo, of course, being the large city there. He is with the Department of Environment and Planning, and that is a group within the DEP that coordinates the county green team's work implementing the internal operations for climate action and sustainability plan, and the development of their phase 3 county watershed management plan, an equity-focused community climate action plan. Dazzle mentioned John Camillo. He is the Director of Sustainability for Colgate University. He's a lead green associate. He's a certified energy manager, and he's the Director of Sustainability there at the university. Since 2009, he's led the sustainability program and the effort to achieve carbon neutrality at the university. Over that time, the university has reduced the campus carbon footprint by 46%. Thank you all for being here and welcome. I think Amanda is going to be our moderator, and so over to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Pat. So I just wanted to start off the panel discussion by asking a question of our panelists. The question is, what was it that drew your community to become involved with the Climate Smart Communities certification? And I'm going to ask Nikki to get us started off.
Thank you, Amanda. And it really is a pleasure to be here with everyone to talk about this program that's been so important for us. I should say that when I was first elected, which was in 2019, our municipality had already been part of the CSC program since 2010, but we didn't understand the program, how it worked, and we weren't really participating or benefiting from it. But because my background's in clean energy financing and my day job is focused on climate change, I was really excited to bring that knowledge and interest to my role as mayor. As I started to investigate the CSC program, I realized that although we were more or less starting from scratch, it wasn't as daunting as I originally thought. And as Dazzle and Amanda both explained earlier, a really sensible starting spot for us was looking at the Clean Energy Communities program. It turns out we'd already completed 5 of the CEC actions, but we hadn't documented them as CSC actions. So we began to understand that we'd done stuff, but we hadn't documented stuff. And that was kind of really the magical missing piece in getting ourselves to the next level. So over the summer of 2019, we hired an intern to work out how the portal worked. That was also highly traumatic, just understanding the portal. And he, of course, was a genius because he's 19 and, you know, he lives and breathes that kind of stuff. And then he also started identifying what actions we'd already done. And I realized that with the right strategy, we could get to bronze and even silver in a pretty quick time. So our strategy was ultra simple: document what you've already done, pursue new actions that are strategic, and set ambitious goals with a specific time frame for achievements. There we go. That's how we got to where we got.
Thanks, Nikki. I think that's probably common of a lot of communities that they've completed clean energy actions and just haven't known or haven't had the time to document them. So thank you for that piece of information. I'm going to ask Josh if you can please address that question. What drew your community to get involved with Climate Smart certification?
Sure. And also thank you for having me here today. This is great. So we were working on an internal operations climate action plan before, in the time frame before this version of the CSE program rolled out, right? So we were doing some things, and one thing that comes up as we were doing our climate action planning is there's just so much out there to do, so many things to consider. It's a little overwhelming, right? To kind of put your arms around what should Erie County or any community do on climate action. So if the timing was really perfect that this program came out that kind of laid out a roadmap in a way, and some nice detailed actions that have like some meat to them that let you kind of understand where to go, right? So it just fit with what we were trying to do. You know, when the federal government pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord, our county executive signed on, and that also kind of turbocharged our initiatives around the same time. But it kind of fit. We needed, and just like Nikki was saying, you know, we found that there was things that we didn't even realize that we'd done, you know, and documenting them was helpful for us to kind of also get our arms around what we needed to do and what we didn't do. So that was kind of our path.
Thanks, Josh. And then John, last but not least, I'll ask you to respond. And also if you could maybe first just mention the communities that you've partnered with at Colgate.
Sure. I'm here representing the Hamilton Climate Preparedness Working Group, kind of a long name, but really what it is we're a collaboration between the town of Hamilton and the village of Hamilton, New York, right in pretty much the geographic center of the state. So it's pretty rural. And, you know, I think there were a few motivations for why we got started in this, but one that cannot be ignored is that we were getting impacted by climate change. I mean, actually the purpose for this work. And if you just look at pure numbers, you know, going back over the past 20 years, we've had on average nearly one federally declared disaster event, weather related, climate related, per year, again, over the past 20 years. And, you know, most of our communities exist or are around watersheds. So we have lakes and rivers and streams and creeks and all that stuff. And our communities were built around, you know, watersheds. So we're close to bodies of water and everything else. And, you know, I think one of the things that became really, really apparent, you know, between the time frame of 2011 and 2013, so in just under 2 years, we had 3 major flooding events in our little community. And again, these are 100-year floodplains. So, you know, 1% chance of flooding in any given year. And we had 3 almost back to back to back. And I think that was an eye opener for people, recognizing that we have to do something about this. So that was part of it. And also, people pay attention to science more or less. And we could see the writing on the wall. I think, in conversations, it became clear that there's going to be winners and losers in this. Climate change isn't going away. And we need to take action to be prepared over the long term. This is not a flash in the pan or a short term effort, but we need to start doing the things necessary to make sure that our community can survive and thrive in this new era. So, like Josh, we found the framework of the Climate Smart Communities program and the Clean Energy Communities program manageable. Like we were able to sort of work within a framework and pick and choose sort of what made sense for us. And it set boundaries on this universe of options when you're first starting to try to figure out, what should we do. um, and then I think, another thing is it just strengthens our community. I like the fact that we work with the town and the village and the university and our Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board and Madison County Planning and the DEC. I think it strengthened a lot of, working relationships in our area that are really important, I think, at any level. So those are a few of the motivations I think that we really had that kind of launched us back in 2016.
Well, thank you all for that. I think a lot of communities can probably relate. So hopefully it's starting to get the juices flowing for our listeners. The next question I'd like to ask the panelists is, which actions in the Climate Smart Community Certification Program was your community most interested in pursuing? And I think we'll start with Josh for this one.
Sure. So, well, as I, kind of with the last question described, we had done work on internal operations and planning that out. And that's kind of the most natural place for a community to start is, doing your internal greenhouse gas inventory and looking at your fleet and your buildings and your other aspects of your operations and figuring out how you can, get your own house in order. The pivoting to the community actions, which is really the core reason for us to be in government, right, is to impact our community, uh, and so important in this realm. That's where those are the actions that have been really helpful for us. So we've with grant support from this program, we've worked on our community climate action planning and some specific actions around the community work. And even as we think about the next rounds and what we're doing next, it's all around that, right? And that is in some ways the tougher thing, right? And so it's been very helpful to have the framework around that.
Thanks, Josh. John, can you respond to that question as well, please?
Sure. Again, I think, the Climate Smart Communities framework offers a lot of options. So there's a lot of stuff out there. But I think from the very beginning, we really looked at what are the key mile markers. So the fixed aids to navigation, right? The key documents or planning um, reports that are actually going to help set the stage for this long-term effort. And there are a few that really stand out. I think, it's planning and data. We didn't have either at the time when we were thinking about climate preparedness for the most part. So I think the first things that we really needed to do was get a greenhouse gas inventory for both the town and the village, for both municipal operations and for the community. That's really important. Manage what you measure. We needed to have an inventory, not just once, but we needed to set up a process where we can repeat this so we know our progress over time. So that was really important. So, okay, well, let's do waste audits and LED streetlights and install electric vehicle charging stations and do those types of things. But we think what's really important is heading in the direction towards these fixed aids of navigation and our journey towards being climate prepared. And the greenhouse gas inventory was essential. So is doing a vulnerability assessment. So while we're trying to reduce our community emissions, we also need to start doing the key things that are going to tell us how vulnerable we are, and then eventually the actions that we can undertake to make sure that we're more of a climate resilient community. So that's really been the big thing: the greenhouse gas inventory, the self-assessment for how climate vulnerable we are, a climate vulnerability assessment, a climate adaptation plan, and a climate action plan. We haven't done all of those things yet. We're still at the front end or towards the middle of our journey, but those are our fixed aids to navigation that we're sort of heading towards. And we figure if we can do those really, really important planning documents and we can get the right data, then we're going to be okay, again, over the long term. And we just use the CSC, the Climate Smart Communities Framework, as a way to sort of put boundaries on all of our work.
Thanks, John. And finally, Nikki, what actions was Hastings on Hudson most interested in?
Well, listening to Josh and John, who sound super strategic and organized and sort of highfalutin in their way of analyzing things, I have to say we were just super practical. So our very first thing was making sure we had the two mandatory actions organized, which is set up the task force and set up a coordinator. And it was actually quite interesting because we decided to set up a task force separate from our conservation commission. And the reason we did that is because we could see that the core goal was going to be documentation. And our conservation commission is very action oriented. They want to do the tree planting. They don't want to write about the tree planting. So we separated those two groups out, and that actually really helped us. And the newly formed task force is what coordinated with the boards and commissions that were focused on action. And the other thing I want to say, which Dazzle, please don't get cross with me, I'm going to slightly emphasize something different than you. I know she said start with priority actions, but we, again, were much more basic. And I think it's very important to look at those priority actions. But our initial strategy was simply to focus on documenting any action we had already done, irrespective of whether it was priority or not. And that was good because it got people feeling as if we had done stuff. People started to feel as if there was accomplishment there and that maybe we had done more than we thought. And once we got started, it was really pretty surprising to us how much we had that was ready to go. And some of them were priority actions, which we only realized sort of ex post facto. So we had our 5 CEC actions. In our case, that was energy benchmarking, launching a solarized campaign, switching out the LEDs, adopting unified solar, and signing up for community choice aggregation, which happens to be a priority action. But we also had a comprehensive plan. We also had a complete streets policy. We also had a hazard mitigation plan. We also had a farmers market. We'd also done some forestry projects, and we were a Tree City USA. We'd remediated a brownfield. We had a sustainability website. And quickly, you can see very quickly these points add up. So that was where we started. And then when we looked at new actions, we kind of had 2 criteria in our strategy. One was low-hanging fruit, and the other was things that were strategic. And so an example of low-hanging fruit is, so we're a very tiny village. We have 8,000 people. We are not a massive, county like the one that Josh represents. We literally have 3 traffic lights in our village. So switching all our traffic lights to LED cost hardly any money and took half an afternoon. So that was a low-hanging fruit, low-cost action, which of course might take Josh several months and a lot of money to accomplish the same thing. And then the other was looking at things that were strategic. So we thought, like John, that a climate vulnerability assessment would be very strategic for us. So we did that. We also decided that passing New York Stretch would be very strategic. And so we ended up doing that. And they were strategic for different reasons. The climate vulnerability assessment set us up for a climate action plan, which is what we hope to do soon. But New York Stretch is something that would get us CEC points. So we were going to get, we were going to be able to pursue actions in two programs simultaneously. But also it had the grant option at the end of the day. So I think each municipality probably has different things that motivate people internally. But that's sort of how we did things. So it was slightly less kind of highfalutin, as I said earlier, than Josh and John. Much more practical and kind of opportunistic, I would say.
Starting to see why you guys are the points leader in clean energy communities.
That possibly is why, because we were just wildly opportunistic.
That's great.
Thanks, Nikki. That's helpful. And, it's good to point out that there's not one good way to become a certified climate smart community. Whatever works for your community works. So it's great to hear these different experiences. My last question for the panelists is, what have been the challenges in pursuing climate smart certification, and how have you overcome them? And what have been the rewards? And I will start with John for this question.
The challenges. Well, this is hard work, and there's not a lot of folks out there who have the technical capacity to do the work. On top of that, I'm speaking on behalf of a very small rural community. And, our town and our village, they do a lot with very little staff. And so the expectations are high, and there's always these proximate issues, right? These things that come up that need our immediate attention, along with all the things that happen that just require day-to-day effort to keep government functioning. And then all of a sudden we're coming in saying, hey, don't forget about climate change. It's an issue. Can we have resources, money, technical support, time? Well, that's an ultimate issue. We don't know when the next climate impact is going to be. Will it be this year, next year, 5 years from now? There's no way to figure that out. So when you start weighing, where do we put people and time and resources and all that? Well, it's on the day-to-day things, right? So I think that's been a challenge. One of the things that Dazzle mentioned was that I represent Colgate University, and I'm working for the university. That's been enormously beneficial, I think, to our community, because we have, the university has a technical expertise. We do greenhouse gas inventories and assessments all the time on behalf of the university. So if we can use some of that capacity to share with our community partners, well, that's helpful. But it's not totally selfless, right? We also have an academic mission, and our faculty want to teach, our students want to learn. We find that students are just a little extra motivated when they're working on issues and problems and challenges in the place where they are. So, all too often, students often are tasked with researching or studying things that are far off in place and time. This isn't one of those things. So they can work with people that live in our area and who are really working to solve, challenges. And I think that's been a little extra rewarding. And so, I think that's a challenge, and that's also been a benefit, right? Like, just to see the body of work that's been done by our students and by our faculty to help our community progress in this area has been highly rewarding. The challenge with that is that I also have a lot of expectations. My office has a lot of expectations just to uphold these commitments at the university. So we often have to balance, this sort of where are we putting our time and our effort in that. Another thing that's been immensely rewarding is I've been at Colgate now for over 12 years. So a lot of the students that I worked with early on have graduated and they're doing professional careers that are climate related. And we were able to secure a grant from a nonprofit organization that helped to fund a former student to help lead us through the municipal climate action plan. So it's those types of connections that I think really help to make this rewarding, where you can see full circle, right? Like where former students who were working on these issues have now consulting firms and professional careers and want to contribute something back to the community where they were at. I know that's not a story that can be shared with everybody who's listening today, but a college or university doesn't have to be physically located in your community to utilize faculty and student research to help with these challenges. And I think one of the most important things to emphasize here before we depart is that we are not going to meet our state goals, the Climate Leadership and Communities Protection Act, without municipal participation. And this is just a great way to build community, to increase awareness, and to take action at the local level.
Thanks, Chad. Nikki, can you answer the same question, please?
Yeah, so some of the challenges. So just one of the key challenges initially for us was just simply to understand the CSC program, to work out how it was linked to the CEC program. There are all these acronyms, and you kind of you just don't know which program you're in half the time, and to decipher what was actually being asked in the action descriptions. So what we ended up doing was we submitted actions in quite close succession. So we submitted in January of 2020, in April of 2020, and in July of 2020. And there were a couple of actions where we actually had to submit it 3 times before we got it right. And Dazzle knows exactly what I'm talking about. It took ages to work out what they were asking us on brownfields. And finally, we worked out that they wanted this very specific certificate. But if we hadn't submitted in close succession, we just would not have known what it was that we weren't quite doing right. Some of the actions are worded in a bit of an academic way, or in a way that doesn't make intuitive sense. So if you have that issue, one solution is what Dazzle was talking about earlier, which is looking at what other municipalities have submitted to kind of guess whether you're more or less in the right ballpark. But also make a point of talking to someone who can help you work things out. So Amanda talked about all of the amazing CSC advisors. Ours, we have Carla Castillo, and we also had Anila Cherian, and both of them were so very helpful in saying, yes, I know it's virtually written in a foreign language, but this is what it means, and that's just really, really helpful. Or, of course, you can call one of the NYSERDA team, and Dazzle has received several calls from me and people in Hastings since 2019 to help us understand what different things mean. Or, of course, you can call someone at another municipality that's already done that action and get advice from them. So I think there are lots of different ways to do it, and the rewards have been really fantastic for us. One of the biggest rewards is that now we have this record as a municipality of all the work we've done on climate change. And also by increasing awareness of the work we've done, people have become more interested. So it's this kind of virtuous circle that's happened. And now we're incorporating climate change into kind of everything. It's like infiltrating everything in this way that I think is very helpful. So we have boards and commissions. Our senior council, for example, is interested in campaigns to reduce energy usage because that saves seniors money. And our youth council is interested in conservancy related projects for high schoolers who want to show colleges that they've done community service. And the Parks and Recreation Commission is interested in conservation and parkland preservation. So we're getting everyone involved without them really realizing what's going on. So, all of that's been fantastic. And my favorite unexpected benefit, which I told Dazzle about, was that the other day I was reviewing our capital budget, and I had to look at some Moody's ratings of the community. And in the latest one, I was completely shocked. There it was, noting that we were a bronze level at that time, climate smart community. So you can see the rating agencies are taking they said they were going to take the ESG factors into account, and now they are actually doing it. So there's this benefit, which is completely not related to the community, to the climate smart communities program, that is, that has had a positive effect for us. So I would say there are many benefits, and it's been really for us such a marvelous program in terms of, I think both Josh and John talked about the framework. What it is a really robust framework where you can't really go wrong. Like pretty much any action that you do is good at the end of the day. You can argue about whether the points have been allocated properly, and you can have all sorts of intellectual debates about what should constitute the right thing for submitting or whatever. But all of that aside, it's a fantastic program, and it is something that really moves the dial. And if all of us are doing it, then we move the dial in a way that makes a massive difference for our county, our state, and ultimately the country and the world. So you can tell I'm a massive fan of this program.
Thanks, Nikki. And finally, Josh, what have been the challenges and rewards for Erie County in pursuing Climate Smart certification?
I think I'm mostly piggyback on some of the things that were said before. But, overall, this issue can feel overwhelming. As a staffer, as a person trying to work in government, there's just, as I said before, or others have said, it's hard to get your arms around it, right? The thing that John pointed out about looking to academia for partnerships has been super effective for us. For our climate vulnerability assessment, we were able to partner with University of Buffalo, and that addressed that. What has given us hope, right? And hope is the key element to all of this work. One key thing that we've been pointing to is the climate act at the state level. The state needs local government partners to get this work done. And we can see that the orientation of the state is going that direction, and that's going to feed in resources so that we can actually work on this, right? There's only so many resources at a county. If I look at what the county does, right, and this is the same for other kinds of governments, but we can't take money from our social services or senior services or our emergency services to work on, something new, right? Everything we're doing is critical. So, and there's no way we can raise taxes and just roll out new programs. So we've got to work in a very constrained environment. But we can see also that as the state starts to pivot, that we can be part of that and we can fit into that. So I'm not exactly answering your question of what is the challenge, other than to say that it's challenging just to work on something that's a new thing that has all these new elements, right? And I know that a lot of the people in our audience today, you're not maybe in towns or villages or counties that have done a ton of stuff on climate change already. You may be seeing yourself as, oh, wow, how am I going to, become like, a town or village that has all this robust stuff going on. The program lets you step into that, and it gets you on a path to meshing with where the state's going. And you can point everyone in the room to that. You can say, we can see with the Climate Act, this is where it's pivoting to. And climate smart communities is the way they interface with us, and they help us set our goals to be aligned with the state. So I think that when you keep that kind of picture and us aligning with the bigger thing that's happening and where there will be significant funding, I think that just gives you hope in a situation that can feel just, overwhelming. So that's my 2 bits.
Well, thank you very much to Nikki, Josh, and John for sharing your experiences, and I'm sure that they have inspired someone in our audience to move forward with climate smart certification. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Pat to initiate the Q&A.
Thank you. Thanks, Amanda. Well, your thoughtful presentations spurred 11 questions, and I am not 100% sure we're going to get to 11 questions right now since we need to stop at 2. But as I said in the beginning, we will be capturing all the, well, now it's 12 questions. We'll be capturing all these questions and sending them out with the slides. So I would like to encourage kind of a lightning round approach, but that's not always possible, right? But for example, we have a 3-part question from an individual, and let's see. I think this is largely an Amanda question, actually. First of 3, does the in the 100% renewable electricity action, does the electricity have to be New York State renewables? Or that could be Dazzle.
Well, for the Clean Energy Communities Program, the 100% renewable electricity action requires that all of your municipal electric accounts be covered by purchasing renewable energy certificates that are retired in NIGATs. So they do have to be New York State renewables.
All right, part 2. Community choice aggregation and opt-out community solar. Do these count as one action or 2 priority actions?
That's a good question. They are 2 separate actions. There's the community choice aggregation renewable default renewables action, and then the community choice aggregation opt-out community solar action. So 2 separate actions, and they each have a separate amount of points associated as well.
Okay, I love this 3rd part here. Can a community campaign that the villages or the town is already doing to get residents not to use gas-powered leaf blowers, could that go toward any of the 4 actions?
No, the 4 community, well, first of all, if you are pursuing a community campaign, it cannot be on, cannot have already started. Because the NYSERDA requires a scoping document be submitted and approved prior to counting any of your signups. But the second part is that the 4 community campaign types are related to community solar, clean heating and cooling and energy efficiency, electric vehicles, and demand response. So gas-powered leaf blowers don't fit within one of those 4 categories. So that would not be eligible either way.
Got you. Next question is, it's likely our community will have completed CEC actions before completing climate smart actions necessary for bronze silver certification. Can CEC grants be issued for partial climate smart communities completion?
So I think I can address that. The Clean Energy Communities program would award climate smart certification points to a community once you are certified. So you have to be fully certified bronze or silver to get points towards those CEC point-based grants.
Very good. Amanda, you're the woman of the hour here. The $5,000 for designated communities, does that need to be used for energy-related projects? For example, would the planting of trees, street trees, be eligible for the $5,000?
I will say that typically these projects need to have some sort of emissions reduction associated. But I will defer to NYSERDA because they ultimately have approval. They give the approval of these grant projects, but they do have to have at least an emissions reduction associated.
Right. Thank you, Amanda. Josh, I know you're not a state official or a community coordinator, but I bet you're going to like this question. Can certain clean energy community actions that counties are currently doing but are excluded from participation be opened up, e.g., energy code enforcement training, LED streetlights on highways in county jurisdictions?
I will answer that by saying that we can pass this along to NYSERDA to consider um, and leave it at that.
Well, I think it's important to mention that we've heard through our Clean Energy Communities Coordinator that they are considering adding actions specific for counties. So they've heard the frustration of counties and they're trying to address it, maybe not by allowing us to participate in actions that we're right now not able to participate in, but maybe by adding some actions that are specific to us.
Thank you. I'm going back to one that I really saw before that was interesting. No, I'm not seeing it. I love this one. Can a town be too small to benefit from the Climate Smart Communities or CEC program?
Well, can I chip in on that one?
Yeah,
I think of us
There
as
you go.
relatively small. We have 8,000 people, and I know we have a neighbor, Ardsley, that has 4,000 people, and there are municipalities that have smaller numbers of people. And my guess is, having spoken to a lot of municipalities now, many municipalities, even though they don't know it, are at bronze level. And you can get there without spending a lot of money. In fact, we spent hardly any money at all to get where we are at this point. So I would be very happy to have, I'll type my contact information into the chat, and I would be very happy to have an offline conversation to help you if there is any way that I can. And I'm sure your coordinators would also be delighted to be able to help you move forward. But my view is you can't be too small, and that all of us can play a role in this important effort of addressing climate change.
You know, I'm going to add to that too. You know, Erie County has 30 some local governments. A lot of them are very small, don't have a lot of capacity, and probably are like the person who wrote this message. And you know, first off, we as a county hope to be a resource for our local governments. And so through our Environmental Management Council, we've talked a lot about what we've done with Climate Smart Communities and CEC, and you know, we've tried to give advice and so forth. But there's some things that make some of these actions easier than they might appear. For example, on doing a community greenhouse gas inventory, that can seem pretty challenging. And way back in the day, I did one for the North Country when I was a consultant, and it was really challenging. But the state has created resources to make that much easier. First off, there's regional greenhouse gas inventories that were done under Cleaner, Greener communities, and we were able to piggyback on that and really, without a lot of work, create a passable community greenhouse gas inventory. It should be improved, but it gives us an idea for that. And then also, NYSERDA has created a utility energy registry of electric and natural gas data in all of our communities that can be used. That's just one example. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that some of these you look at and you're like, wow, how would I get from here to there? And it turns out that there might be resources like your county that can help, and there might also be resources like NYSERDA is providing with the utility energy registry that can help a lot too.
I'll also just add quickly in support of both Josh's and the mayor's comments, especially the mayor's comments. You know, maybe I'll even emphasize it a little bit more. I don't think that New York State can maintain or double down on its leadership nationally without the support of and the action of small rural communities in particular. This is something that I've been personally passionate about, because you know, most of the land in New York State is under rural ownership or distinction. So we have to find a way to have small communities participate in this. And when we started this process formally back in 2016, it wasn't a race to certification. It was about community building, building partnerships, recognizing again, and I keep emphasizing this, but it's such a take-home point, that this is long-term stuff. And we are trying to plan for for climate change that is not going to go away in a generation or two, but is going to excel, and it's going to be with us for a long time. So if you come into it thinking, what work can we begin doing now that's going to ensure that our community can survive and thrive over the next coming generations and decades, well, then suddenly, racing to get points for a climate smart communities program or a clean energy communities program sort of doesn't seem as much of a priority. And I'm not, I hope I'm not devaluating the program, because it's been these programs that have caused us to take these actions. But it's just, we're taking the pressure off and saying, not only can we do this, but can we do this right and in a way that can be repeated over the long term? And I think coming into it like that, you find an opportunity for community members in small places to begin this work and this process.
Thank you, John. We have had a couple of questions about that very thing, about the capacity issues of small communities to really participate in this. Here's just a nuts and bolts one. Amanda, do you know when the next energy code enforcement training is going to be?
So those are scheduled per region, but we did make the decision as a statewide team that the energy code enforcement trainings will start in the fourth quarter of this year. So I would reach out to your local coordinator to see what date your training will be in your region. Of course, the trainings are open to anybody from any region, but you might not want to travel 6 hours to get to a training. But I would keep an eye out for the fourth quarter. That's when the training should be opened up, and you should be hearing from your coordinator, probably third quarter, starting to advertise registration for those trainings.
Okay, thank you. I just want to acknowledge that toward the end today, a very thoughtful question has come in about where nuclear energy fits in, and it is beyond our scope to do that discussion right now, but I will make it available to the panelists to add their thoughts to it, and I thank the questioner for sending it to us. We did mostly get through the questions, so thank you everyone for your participation in. I think it's been a really great exchange. And as always, the devil's in the details and the follow-up. So your contact information, panelists, is out there already. It came with the marketing materials for this. And you will, everyone, be getting a document or an email from us that has their information again and the summary of today's program. So thank you all very much. It was terrific having you, and till next time, see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.